Hello and welcome to Gamer Social Club's second ever Spoilercast. I am your host Dara, and I'm once again joined by the lovely Candy. Say hello.
Hello.
And we're here to discuss the recently released adventure game slash visual novel Paranormasight: The Mermaid's Curse. But before we begin, if you want to keep up with this show and other shows on Gamer Social Club, such as Girl Pod or the weekly news show, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Also, make sure to check out our base of operations at gamersocialclub.ca, where you can find our daily written content, such as our news, reviews, and more. And if you're interested, also be sure to check out the Discord, where you can chat with our lovely little but growing community. Is there anything else I'm forgetting to start with before we get into things?
Uh, Nothing that you are forgetting. If you want unbiased news, that we got you, and we finish all of our games before we review.
Yeah,
So you know that you are getting like a full quality review, and it is not I played 5 hours and
yeah,
here's a slapped on score of whatever.
yeah. If you want a better intro that goes into excruciating detail on everything, go watch the news pod.
Yeah.
Harry spends like 5 minutes at the beginning of every episode
Yeah, and
talking about that.
I barely get through like the basic introductions on Girl Pod, so you got a nice range of everything in between on between the
I'm
channels.
gonna get an angry DM from Harry afterwards, or a call out in the Discord for dissing him after not being on News Pod for like 3 months.
I say it every once in a while. I'm like, you want the full thing? Go watch Newspod. They do that over there.
Yeah, he does a great job giving all the details so that we don't have to. You
Yes,
know?
exactly. He'll tell you he's named them like the three pillars or whatever, and I'm like, I didn't even
Yeah.
know we had pillars besides finish the damn game before you review.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Speaking of finishing games, we both have finished Paranorma Sight: The Mermaid's Curse. This
Yes.
is a sequel, technically. It's a bit of an anthology thing to 2023's Paranorma Sight: The Seven Mysteries of Honjo. Um, you reviewed the game for the website.
Did.
Uh, what did you think of it? Give us kind of the rundown on that.
I really enjoyed this game. There is something about the idea of a sort of safe fourth wall breaking that I really love, and this game does it so well. To the point where when I wrote the review, I decided to get a little cheeky fun with it, and before actually spoilering anything, I would put in a screenshot of, either the narrator coming in or someone saying something that makes it sound like they are stopping me from telling you more about the game, because I think people really should play this game. And I did not play the first one, so this was my first experience with a Paranorma Site game, and you don't really. And there's a few things that are probably better, and we'll talk about those. You know, if you've played the first one, you don't really have to have played the first one to play this one, which is nice because sometimes you dive into a game and it's like, oh, great, like I'm missing something because I didn't play this, and I have to go back and play this other one. You don't really have to do that, which is, I think, really helpful in these sorts of games, especially if for some reason this is the first one you're picking up, right? If maybe the first one looked like it was going to be a little too horror-esque for you and you wanted something that felt a little bit safe, maybe the themes really draw you in. Um, but it was narratively a really good experience, visually a really cool experience. I love the way that they tie it back to like Japanese culture using Japanese artwork, Japanese mythology, right? So it also feels very, very set in a place that is interesting to me, in a place that I've always wanted to like visit and learn more of. So it feels like this interesting cultural exchange while also giving you this experience that's so out there and fantastical. But it's a perfect blend where it doesn't feel too out there. It doesn't feel unreal. It doesn't feel like inaccessible to the person who's not from the area. And I think that's a testament to good writing and good storytelling.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I love the first one when it came out. It was a bit of a sleeper hit when it came out in 2023. But the main reason that I was kind of attracted to it was because the art is done by I can't remember the exact artist's name, but one of the lead artists on The World Ends With You.
Hmm.
The DS Square Enix game that had a sequel in like 2020. 2021 or something like that. But yeah, no, so it had like the aesthetic of it was really strong and really appealing, and like you said, the way that it ties back to kind of Japanese mythology and folklore and stuff, and the writing is just there's is very dense. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like there's just a ton of writing in those little like files that you can read through and stuff. It's just a very unique flavor of visual novel in terms of just the way it plays with non-linearity, the way
Mhm.
the characters have their own internal dialogue that is unique, and you know that they all have their kind of biased perspectives and things like that. You gave it an 8.5, which I absolutely agree with. I think that that's a great score for the game because I think much like the original, this one is it's very consistent with the original. I
Mhm.
probably scored them
Okay.
about the same. It doesn't feel like it necessarily breaks any new ground, but it also feels like it retains everything great about the first game. So that one was more horror focused, like you said.
Mhm.
This one is a little less so, and they've been on record saying that there's the reason for that is because they wanted to allow it to be more accessible
Yeah.
to people. Like, there's still horror elements. There's still the odd kind of, you know, person coming close to the camera to jump scare you kind of
Mhm.
thing, or you know there's the diving mini game now which has some kind of spooky things happen every now and again in it. um but yeah, no, so the game follows, I think it's four different central protagonists, right? It's I have the names taken down. There's Sato,
Mhm.
there's Yuza, which is the
Mhm.
one that you start with, there's Yumeko, and there's Avi.
Yes.
And so yeah, you start with Yuza, who's just a young boy living in this kind of it's an island off the coast of Japan. It's not mainland because they
Mhm.
refer to going to the mainland every now and again. And basically there's like a history on this island with mermaids. He has history with mermaids.
Yes,
uh
he does. Mhm.
yeah, and there's kind of this influx of people coming to investigate because there's a corpse found. This happens in one of the other stories, but there's a corpse found essentially of just like a dried up human mermaid hybrid thing,
Mhm.
basically. Um, how did you find the, kind of the beginning of the game? You know, before any of like the shifts started to happen. You know, before we kind of switch protagonists and the like.
I mean, I could have played that diving mini game for so long. There
Yeah.
was something calming and fun about it, and I was like, "This is the type of mini game that I could zone out to, and just, like, keep collecting and keep increasing my score," and I did, throughout the gameplay, end up maxing out my score just because I could. Um, but I did like jumping in as, Yuza, at the start and just being like, "Okay, here's our sort of introduction," right? And you hear that that's who you're gonna play as, and again, having not played the first one, I appreciated that it was like, "You're gonna play as this character, and later on you're gonna shift," but you didn't know that you were gonna shift. All of a sudden, it's like, "Whoa,
Yes.
here's this timeline." And here's this branching out. And I knew that it was sort of nonlinear, but having our sort of he's not even a fully blank slate because there's lots of stuff that happens,
Yeah.
but he
Yeah. We
feels
learn
like
a
a
lot
blank
more
slate.
about him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At the start, it feels like a blank slate compared to everybody else. So it feels like a good introduction to what the game is going to be and
Yeah.
how it's gonna, transpire. I mean, you're getting a little bit of his past and just tiny, tiny nuggets of why he wants to be a diver, right? Which, as
Yes.
it goes
Yeah.
through, is not necessarily the full story, right? And you have to keep playing to get his full story, which I think is really fun. Um, and what I really liked in that first chapter, and I think I had messaged you this too, in that or I shouldn't call it chapter, first segment, right? Um, you're trying to do things, and if you don't find exactly something that you need to progress the story, the game is basically like, no, go back and do it again,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. They
And
kind
it's
of bounce you back. Yeah.
very early on, which I appreciate though, because I'm like, okay, you are setting this expectation for what this game is, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And if you want the hint, you can get the hint, right? The I forget if he's the narrator storyteller,
Yeah,
Uh,
the storyteller.
Storyteller. Yeah, I sometimes refer to him as, like, narrator, so correct me, but, the storyteller is like, "No, go back. Do you want a hint on what to do?" It's like, "Okay, this is a spoiler cast, so I'm gonna tell you what he says."
Oh, yeah,
He's
yeah.
like, "Turn around," right? Like, "Look behind you."
Yes.
And then that is what continues the story, and I do appreciate that if you don't find that on your own, you see that there are options that are blocked to you, right? So when he's talking to his friend, it's like
Yeah.
there should be two options here, but I only have access to one. So clearly I missed something. So there's also these very good visual cues in what I hate to call it the tutorial area, but it's like we're not going to let you
Oh,
go
it
too
is. Yeah.
far. Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
yeah, because it's still part of the story. So it's like it's
Yeah.
tutorial, but it's getting you used to their gameplay, right? So it's like here's what you're gonna miss. Here's what you're gonna see if you're missing something. Here's how you'll progress. The storyteller will interrupt you. He'll give you the clues that you need. He'll tell you how to play. The other thing that I thought was really cool was the fourth wall breaking starts from the beginning with the storyteller
Oh,
as
yeah,
he's
yeah.
actually telling you like this is the way you play. These are the buttons. This is
Yeah.
this, right? Turn around. Okay, great. You're looking at me again, right? And even in those little nuances where he's like, turn around and do this, right? So then when you don't go looking behind you as Yuza during those first few dives, and he's like, it almost feels like he's looking at you like, I told you to turn around and, like, explore. Like,
Yeah.
I literally made you
Yeah.
turn around and you did not do this. Like, go back and turn around and find what you're missing to progress the story. It's like, "Oh, yeah, okay."
Yeah, like that's one of the things that I really loved about the first game that I think really helps the series stand out nowadays is it really has a lot of like the eccentricity and charm of like the kind of DS era like
Mhm,
visual novel games or adventure games where they're a little irreverent. They want you to kind of think outside the box. It reminds me a lot of like one of my favorite games of all time is Another Code, the original DS, or I think it's called Trace Memory
mhm.
in the US. Um, and in that original game, there's a puzzle that requires you've got to like stamp something, but the game just presents you with a screen, and you have the DS, and you tap on the screen, you don't know what the hell to do or whatever. And what the game requires you to do is to close the DS and open it back up multiple times in order to stamp something. And it's just I feel like that level of thinking, that level of just
Mhm.
like wanting the player to actually thoughtfully engage with the world is present in both this and in the first game, especially in the ways that like the storyteller will pull you up sometimes and just be like, who's behind all this? Who's
Yeah.
responsible? Type it into your keyboard right now.
Mhm.
Like and having you go through all of the files and read, like actually read, like pay attention to the narrative that is
Yes.
unfolding in front of you, but then also in the way that they tutorialize things, the way in which they kind of treat it as a video game and treat it as a piece of interactive narrative, in that like they have the storyteller grounding things and telling you, like this is how you move the camera and this is
Mhm.
how you like look behind you, this is how you progress, like we're gonna you're gonna be reading for a lot of this, but you're also gonna be an active participant in the narrative.
Yes, 100%. And I think, the reading for me, again, as someone who's like very interested like in that culture, and yes, some of it is obviously fictional.
Yeah,
And they tell you, they also do tell you like this is a fictionalized island, right? Like this is,
yeah.
these parts are real, this is fiction, right? So
It's
they're
based on
very
a
clear
real
with that.
island,
It's
I
based
believe,
on a
but it's
real one.
not it's not Taishima, I think is where it takes place. I don't think that's like an actual
Right.
location.
Right. So they give you all that information so that, you can read through it. And I think people that will really enjoy the game are the people that will take the time to read
Yeah,
through all of this because it's helping to build the world. And if you are someone who is very much like I'm very interested in world building, I'm very interested in, you know, hearing more, not just the characters and the people, but how the world impacts those characters and people, right? And especially for this narrative that they're going with, you have to understand like the
yeah.
background, the context to understand why it impacts these people, in such a very specific way. Um, you have to understand the cultural context. And I think it's also, when we're talking about the cultural context and, we're recording this on International Women's Day. Yay. A lot of they keep saying, "Oh, a lot of the AMA divers are women," right? And they keep
Yeah.
bringing that up. So then when you have Yuza who is looking to do this, right? It it feels like almost going against, the grain. His friend who, he has a group of friends that he spends time with, that we
Yeah.
meet throughout the game. The one male friend that we see him spend a lot of time with is not a diver. He's the one piloting the boat, right?
Yes. Yeah.
And then so it's like he feels like the outlier, right? And then you find out that, well, he's doing the diving, yes, because he feels like he should help his grandma, but also he's
Yes.
exploring to find a mermaid, right? And he's doing these things, right? So you start to unravel that it's not just that he's trying to, break the barrier. He has
Yeah.
his own motivations. So all these little nuances with things like that. And you wouldn't really think too much about him being an AMA diver because you're like, okay, like people of all genders can go like diving, obviously, but it's like, oh, but in this
Yeah.
place.
Specifically,
Hmm.
yeah, historical context, yeah, would
Mm-hmm.
deem that, yeah, he's kind of breaking the mold a little bit. I loved that scene towards the end, where you learn that Yuza is a 800-year immortal, and well, it's you learn, but the game kind of just asks you. It's like, okay, you've watched this character die however many times.
Yes.
Who do you think we're talking about right now? Who do you think is the
Mm-hmm.
800-year immortal? I love the fourth wall breaking there, the like presenting you with because it's like for me it was 7 times. I was like 7 times. Who the hell have I watched die 7 times throughout the course of the game? I don't think there's anybody in any of the stories I've seen that has I've watched die 7 particular times. It's like, oh, it's the diving mini game. It's
Mm-hmm.
because when I played that, I died 7 times,
Yep.
and that's how you learn. They contextualize that through the narrative, which I think is so cool and very much in line with what the first game was going with in terms of like, you know, fourth wall breaking, but also like everything is narrative. Everything
Yes.
is in the world of the story.
Yeah. I got 5 times and I was like, 5 times. And I was like, oh well.
Okay,
And
flex.
the only reason I only got 5 times was because I was, trying at first to get through the game as
Yeah.
fast as I could to get a review out. So I did, okay, well, I'm gonna do the mini game, and then I was like, all right, let me progress the story, right?
Mm.
I can always come back and try to do the mini game afterwards if I want to do the mini game or whatever. So and then that was also why I never turned around to look behind me to progress the story anyway. And he's like,
Yeah.
hey, stupid, go turn around when you go back to mini dive, right? And I'm like, oh, okay, thanks. Um, so I was like, oh, 5 times. And at this point, I had started to put some of it together. And I think the only reason I had started to put some of it together was because I've played a few other of these sort of fourth wall breaking games. Um,
Yeah.
so especially like the Nirvana initiative, that depending on how you do things, they are literally talking directly to you. Um,
Yeah.
I think one of the first ones that I played, like Doki Doki Literature Club, where a specific
Of course.
character is speaking directly to you, right? And you have to do certain things to stop all of that. Um, right. So I was like, oh, this is me that we're talking about, right? But it's me, but it's not me because at the beginning of the game, he lets you ask 2 questions, or he gives you an option of 2 questions, and you can say, "Who am I?" And I forget what the second question is. So then when you get to the end of the game, it's like, "Oh," he's like, "Who are you?" And I'm like, "Oh, my answer is that I now, right, am
Mhm.
not Candy playing this game.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
am Yuza, but a different version of Yuza who is sort of trapped in this
Yeah.
world because of what happened, and it's some of these small nuances too in the game where it's like if you weren't paying attention to the text heavy, right, you will miss it
Oh,
because
yeah.
somebody earlier literally talks about, well, if you're an 800-year immortal, could you, lose your head and be regenerated, right? Like they literally talk about this in a scene,
Yes.
right? So then when you get to the storyteller, if you were just blipping through this and not reading it and not catching it, you'd be like, "Well, I don't know who I am. I'm gonna put in my own name." No, you are the version of Yuza that, you know, sort of died, but not really died because he's immortal, right? So it's like
Yeah.
you have to pay attention to those nuances, and I appreciate that in games and be like, what nuance is important here,
Yeah,
right?
it plays with the story chart as well because it's like
Yes.
if you have that scene with Yuza and then like you go back to the story chart and like that scene breaks, but then you get another one, you're like, how am I still playing as Yuza? Like I just saw him get decapitated, or I just
Mhm.
was his POV getting decapitated. You know,
Yes.
how am I get and it contextual because again, everything is narrative, and I just love that the world that they create through that, and the kind of just way in which it challenges your kind of understanding of storytelling and of art.
Mhm.
Reminds me a lot. I don't know. Have you ever played 13 Sentinels?
I have started it. I have not finished it. Again, it's another heavy narrative that it's like,
Yeah.
pay attention.
Yeah, that game does some similar stuff with its non-linearity. I won't spoil. Although that's a game I would love to talk about because that's one of the best to ever do it as well. Um,
I mean, look,
but yeah, no, that
I'll put it on the
it
list.
yeah of non-linear visual novel. That one has like RPG
Mhm.
battles in it. But yeah, like visual novel adjacent kind of non-linear games. But yeah, no, just in terms of like its unique flavor, its unique brand of that stuff. I just really like how grounded these stories are in
Yes.
respecting the player's intelligence
Mhm.
and giving you the space to actually uncover everything for yourself. Because there's always this discussion about like detective games and especially visual novels, you know, your Ace Attorneys and stuff, which I love to death. But like they do kind of give you everything you need in a very presentable fashion
Mhm.
to where not it's not always a case of you discovering things for yourself, not like something like, you know, Return of the Obra Dinn or Blueprints or something like that, you know, where it is really just you got to be sitting there with a pen and paper. You know, it's a lot more kind of walled in
Yeah.
terms of the approach of discovery. But these games, they give you everything, but you have to dig. You have to actually like engage with the narrative again, you know, to
Mhm.
understand it all. Um, but yeah, I could go on about that forever.
No, it's just it's so I think it's refreshing, right? And not to say that I don't like games where they just sort of give you everything if it's like a good story, if it,
Oh yeah,
and game and I also like games that don't really have stories sometimes, right? Like and that's fine, but it's when you want something a little bit meatier, right? Like this is perfect for that, right? It's like I want
yeah,
to really think things through. I want to be like reading all of this. Like I want to just lose myself in this world, in this universe, and in these characters. And all
yeah,
of that reading and narrative just really helps with that. Because, sometimes they mention things like very to the side, and sometimes it's not actually that important, but it's a fun little thing about the character, right? Like,
yes,
and I think those moments, and it's like, oh, well, you can read all about them in this file, and, cool, great, right? Like,
yeah,
I could care less for the most part about like Shotaro, right? Who is his own character who's very tangentially related to the plot, but not as important as
yeah.
some of the main cast, right? But he's got a whole backstory that I could read, right? And it's like,
Oh
okay,
yeah,
great, right? Like you have fully fleshed out these characters. And as the player, I want to respect that and dive into it because this is adding to my enjoyment of the game, right?
yeah,
Um, what I not as this what I'm gonna say is not as deep, but if anybody's watching this and I want you to watch this and I want people who are good at making memes to make memes, I'm not good about this, but can people please take screenshots of Avi and just I feel like they would be such good memes, like just his reactions of things. I am not a
yeah,
good meme maker, but like my God, like that character lends himself to being like a meme
yeah.
template so
I've
well.
seen some of the bits, you know, there's like one quote where he's like, "No, don't let my joke be an actual topic of discussion." I've seen that thrown around on Blue
Yep.
Sky for the past couple of weeks and so you brought up Avi. He's my favorite character in the whole game. Him and I think it's Circe. I think that's how you pronounce it.
Yeah, I'm not
Um
sure if it's Circe or like Cersei. Like, yeah,
Oh, it's probably Circe. That's a very wizardy
that's
name.
why. Yeah, I was like, that feels.
Yeah, Cersei sounds right. But yeah, that like those two are my favorite in the game. Like the game has a lot of great like characters like with
Mhm.
really strong dynamics. Um, every character kind of has a companion. Like every
Yes.
protagonist kind of has a companion. To I also love the paranormal investigator duo as well. Yumeko, I love that there's just like this little thing with her that she's like obsessed with her husband, and
Yes.
she's just like is constantly going on, but we never see who her husband is. We never learn like anything
Yeah,
about him.
we
Am
do.
I wrong?
We do. You
Oh,
have to
wait,
read the
yes.
file.
Yes, you're
Yes.
right. Yes.
But you don't get
Yeah.
that until I think it's well, I'm gonna say so close to the end of the game. It was very because of the order that I got some of the endings, I think I got it very close to
Yes.
the end of the game. Depending on the order that you get your endings, because this game does have multiple endings,
Yes, yeah.
you may learn it earlier than I did, right? Or later than I did. Um, it's I guess to explain a little bit more, in finding the mermaids or in finding the
Mhm.
mermaid which Yuza is trying to do, and Avi is also looking for a mermaid for his own purposes, and it's the mermaid's curse, so everybody is looking for a mermaid, or finds
Yeah.
a human mermaid hybrid, which brings them to this island to investigate, right? Um, you learn about 3 mermaids, and you are hoping that you can find at least one of them, right? I will give you the spoiler that you will find 2 of them.
Yeah.
Uh, one of them
Oh, we'll
is
get into that because I have
yeah.
some. I thought that that scene was so interesting.
Oh my god. It's like one of them is with you the whole time, and
Yes.
one
Yeah.
of them is with you a good chunk of the time.
Yes. Yeah.
And again, that was like one of the things that was so clever. And with Yumeko, there's something about her because when you first get to play her, because she's one of the playable points of view, right?
Yes.
She has this special sight. And it's like, well, she's a paranormal investigator. Like, whatever, she's got this sight. Whatever. And I just remember being like, what's your deal, right? We know that this one has, this energy and he comes from a long line of, investigators and blah 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 and Cersei is Cersei and doing her damn thing, right? And
Yeah.
literally just doing her own thing, being like, I'm
She's
supposed to
literally like a
be
wizard.
yeah. And it's like I'm supposed to be under the protection or guidance of these people, but instead I'm traveling Japan with this long lost relative of mine that just is
Yes.
here.
Yeah.
It's like, what? Like, so for Yumeko to have this, like, this ability that you can tap into, I was like, there's more to your story,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you have to they mention it, they mention it through, like, the husband,
Mhm.
and it's like, okay, so she has this husband, great. All right, you never meet him, but
Yes.
when you
Yeah. That's
finally
what I
unlock
meant.
that
Yeah.
file, yeah, it's
Yes.
like, oh, what an interesting no wonder you can't wait to get like, as you're reading it, it's like,
Yeah.
"Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Now that I've
Yeah.
seen what you have experienced, yeah, I'd wanna get back too."
Yeah. No, but the characters and their dynamics are truly great. I actually do think that I like this cast more than the
Okay.
first games, and that's not to say anything about the first games. It's just I find that this cast they feel more well-rounded. I think we spend a little bit more time with them. They feel again they have the dynamics to play into. Not all the characters in
Mhm.
the first game have somebody that they're kind of playing off of. Yeah, generally the dynamics, the way in which the dialogue is written, the internal monologues, the way
Mhm.
that they are kind of unique for every perspective is more
Yes.
fresh this time around and is just in general great.
Yeah, and even with the pairings, some of them have I would even say, like, multiple pairings, right? And it mostly, like,
Yes.
the main teenage cast, right? And I know they're, like,
Yeah.
18, 19, or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
but, because 'cause you're like, "Okay, well, Yuza pairs very closely with his friend, but he also pairs with Sato," and you can see where he
Yes.
also pairs, with even, in a few moments, like, the investigator when he's talking to her, and you can see that the even when the relationships are tense or not super friendly, it doesn't feel super awkward unless there's something that's meant to feel awkward in that exchange, right? It's
Yeah.
like, okay, everybody can work well off of each other. We see that it's not like, oh, it's not like you can't imagine these characters talking to anybody within it and
Yeah.
having some other relationship, right? Avi can talk to a wall and probably be interesting, right? Um, and you see where there's these small connections that even if they don't fully interact or don't interact in a positive way, let's say, as you get towards the resolution of one of the endings, right? You can see how them all coming together works and doesn't feel forced.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, they make that feel so natural,
Mhm.
and they make the story converge in a way that just yeah, it feels very natural. It feels very well executed and well conceived. The stuff with Yuza and Sato, I thought was a little left field. I think it's just the way in which you kind of
Come to it.
you can come at it from different
Mhm.
angles, like but the stuff at Yuza and Sato I was a little taken aback by, just because they do reveal that like they had been planning stuff since before the narrative began, and so you do have to recontextualize a lot of their actions that you've
Mhm.
seen up until that point. But what did you think of that? Because I was just like, whoa. um
Yeah, at first I was like, but then, you know, again with the recontextualize of it, right? And thinking more about it like sort of long term. Um, at first I was like, this just feels like the two of you are trauma bonding because you're
yeah.
both 800-year like immortals, right? This doesn't, so at first I was like, this doesn't feel as natural. But then when I thought about it more, I was like, well, it doesn't feel as natural because the way I'm experiencing the story feels very
Yes.
sped up. But for them, this took place over, like a month or whatever. I think it's about a month. Um, so I'm like, I'm experiencing it by seeing snippets of 2 days, 3 days, right?
Mm.
And so I'm seeing this, them sort of sitting in silence, and then finally talking, but I'm like, "No, but they were engaging with each other a little bit before that, right?" And
Yes.
then
Yeah.
he's also seeing how she is with his grandmother, right? And I think, that for some people, if not most people, when you see how someone engages with someone who is important to you, right?
Yeah.
That also leads to, you know, feelings and thoughts about them that can lead to, yes, I want to spend the next 800 years with them, or
Yes.
however many years it is. Um,
Yeah.
so it did at first it did feel like, oh, we're just throwing this in, but then I was like, well, she also, was trying to get I can't think of the name of her friend right now. Um,
Yeah, I can't think either.
but I was
The
like
girl with the glasses, yeah,
yeah, she's
yeah.
trying to convince her like, yes, you should, tell Shotaro how you're
She looks like
feeling, and you
Velma.
she does. She really does.
Yeah.
I think that's why I can't remember her name because the first time I saw her, I was like,
Yeah.
"You feel very Velma to me," and I know that's not your name, but,
Yes.
um,
Yeah.
but she's like, "Yes, you should go tell Shotaro how you're feeling, and let me help you do this," and I'm like, "Yeah,
Mm,
with the additional context of her relationship with, Yuza, and not knowing that she will get that extra time, and knowing what, a shorter lifespan that she's facing." It's like, yeah, she's probably like, "Yes, if you see this, go for it because, like, if this is gonna bring you joy the way I feel this happiness now, like, I want you to do it." So it's like when you think about it in
yeah.
those other contexts, but the first time I was like, "Do we need this?" And then I was like,
Yes, yeah.
"Okay."
It does also, like yeah, like, for a lot of it, I think it's because it's presented so quickly, or at least
Mhm.
for me, it was presented very quickly in terms of like, "Oh, okay, they're, like, a thing, or they've had a relationship, and they're, like, deeply in love with each other and stuff." But it's like, okay, you go back to the scenes with Sato with Yuza's grandmother, and it's like, okay, yeah, I can see here that their dynamic is clearly
Mhm.
very fleshed out, and clearly, there has been more going on here, around kind of the edges of what I've kind of seen so
Right.
far. Not to be Gen Z about it though, but 800 years, that's a problematic age gap.
That
That's
is
that
yeah.
was kind of, I was a little bit like, okay, that's an interesting that they've gone so for the fences like that, but
I mean, I
okay.
guess, has she really aged? She was asleep for how many years?
I
It's
mean,
like
yes, she did spend like almost all of the 800 years just dying and
mhm.
reincarnating and being
Yep.
conscious throughout that, and then losing all of her memories. So
Mhm.
yes, that definitely
So
I
it's
was
like,
just
is she
there's
really? But yeah.
Yeah. There's all of those kind of like cases with like, yeah, immortal characters and then they meet the love of their life who is a
Mhm.
teenager. And it's like, okay, that's a little weird. That's a little
It's
weird.
it is, and I will say, speaking of Sato, her reveal was one of the moments that I really wanted to, like, talk about because it was one of the moments that finally felt, like, sort of unsettling, and not that it was
Oh yeah.
unsettling with, you know, what she was or whatever, but the cuts in the game, which but I think
Mhm.
they were perfect. Again, it's not a horror game, but it has some of those horror elements, but, when you first find her, and you can see that she's clearly bleeding, and then it's cutting to the file, right? And it's cutting back
Yes.
to her, and it's cutting to the file to zoom in on like this name, right? And I
Yeah,
was
that's a
just
really
like,
well executed scene.
yeah, I was like, this is
Yeah.
jarring, but in the perfect way it's jarring because
Yeah.
and it's one of the few, I think it's one of the few times that they force feed you the information, but
Oh
it
yeah, yeah.
almost feels like a reiteration of like, hey, remember to read the files, right?
Yeah, that whole scene with the like disaster on the beach, and like you come at it from different angles throughout the game, but that whole scene when like there's the curse that's like just like slicing people up and stuff. I love the sense of panic in that scene. I love the
Yes.
sense of just like what the fuck is happening? What you know, like it's just out of control. And then you're also learning about Sato, kind of in a different kind of parallel
Mhm.
storyline and stuff. It's really cool the way the game it creates a real sense of like um place and like the island I feel has like a real atmosphere to it even if you never physically like walk around it.
Yeah.
You only experience it through these characters' eyes, but you do get chances where you get to they have it mapped out and stuff. You get to go to different places, but like there is like a tangible feeling of like okay, this is I'm you kind of feel like you could just like walk across it in
Mhm.
about like 15 minutes just from the way that they map it out in the game. So when stuff like that happens and you've got this curse like slicing everybody up and you're
Yes.
like running through and witnessing all of like the side characters and stuff go through that it is really cool and well just implemented um just with the sense of identity the
Mhm.
game gives its location.
Yeah. Oh, 100%, and I think I think that was the first big ending that I got, right? So
Yeah.
it was like, okay, so now I know this is this curse that I'm trying to avoid, right? And and again, the reminder of like read the files, look at this, right? Like,
Mhm.
and I feel like that was very purposeful to be like, this is what happens if you don't read through the things because you will miss
Yes.
the clues that you need, right? So then it's like, okay, so now I do have to really spend the time reading everything. But that feeds back into that sense of identity because now it's like, what is it that I'm missing that is going to give me the context to be able to prevent this, right? And how
Yeah.
do I, how do I prevent this? There's 40, 50 files, right? Am I going through everything? Am I and you're not typically at that time because you probably haven't unlocked all of the files, right? Or even if you have unlocked a good chunk of them, there's still things missing that you will get as
Yeah.
you continue to progress, right? But it's like this is, and I think this speaks more to the identity of the game as a whole, where again, I'm not going to force feed you things, but I'm going to remind you, right? And I will
Oh,
give
yeah.
you
Nudge you in
hints.
the right direction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But you still have to put in the work, right?
Yeah.
Which is a great way of doing it because then it feels that much more satisfying. Well, that
Yeah.
much more satisfying or that much more depressing. Like if you get
Yeah.
Avi's bad ending versus Avi's good ending, and I'm like, oh, this is sad. All right.
The
And I'm like, oh, but
vibes
this is
are
cool.
I just went back and I got the rest of the endings last night just to refresh myself on some stuff because I finished it earlier in the week. And the vibes on Avi's like good and bad ending are polar opposite. It's like, you know, immortality derogatory versus immortality complimentary, like where
Yes.
it's like in one scenario he lives 800 years amazingly, it goes so well for him. In one story he's just in 800 years of pain and
Mm-hmm.
containment and yeah. um yeah, no, it's just it. again, like the way in which they trust the player, I think is just so refreshing to go and figure things out for themselves. You touched upon like the scene where it's kind of revealed that Sato is an 800-year immortal, and one of the best scenes in the game, I think, comes a little bit after that. Again, depending.
Mhm.
Um, where you learn that she's been kind of living with Wakamura, who's like this. He runs the.
The
I'm actually trying to
island,
remember
so
exactly.
he, like
Yeah.
yeah, he I think they mentioned briefly that she's staying with him before that because they refer to her as his like a not long lost relative, but they refer to her as like some distant
Yes.
relative, right? Very
Yes.
very
Yeah.
quickly, and that's where she's staying. She's
I
staying
think
there
it's
watching
also
TV all day.
when you meet his son or the guy that her friend has a crush on.
Mhm.
I think it's
Yeah,
brought up at
that's
some
his
point
son.
then as well.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's brought up very like, again, it's one of those moments that's brought up very passively, right?
Hmm.
In her story,
Yeah.
and
You're
who she
informed of it
is.
later.
Yeah, you get way more the details of why she's there, you know.
Yeah.
Um yeah, and like her relationship with Wakamura and how that
Yes.
duo sort of came to be is
Yes.
really
So like
interesting.
yeah, like he basically found her after she had washed up on the beach and had learned of her immortality, and essentially sold her off to this other guy, uh, Unkaku Nodo. I had to write that down because it's just a crazy. I'm not gonna remember that, but yeah, like she essentially has like because he's trying to learn how to gain immortality. He's like really coy about that at first as well. He's like, "That's not for me. I just want to know."
Mhm.
Which obviously we learn more about later, but like he essentially just sells her off to this guy and is like, okay, like pack your shit up, you're going to him. And from her perspective, like playing that, and going through that whole sequence and trying to figure out what to do, I felt like an immense sense of dread from
Yes.
that. Like the way that is communicated is so intense and it's so scary because she is kind of beginning to realize these things about herself as well. She's having her memories come back to her and stuff.
Mhm.
I just felt like the way that that is portrayed through the writing and through just the limited visuals that you have just created like a real like actual sense of dread in me.
I think I feel like you feel the most dread with her story because
Yes, yeah.
she is, she's been a victim, and some
Yes,
of it
yeah.
is of her choosing at the beginning where she sacrifices, like when you go through the whole story, it's like, how are we preventing this disaster? 800 years ago, a princess is the one who, gave herself up to save the island,
Princess
blah, blah, blah.
Hatsune Miku.
Yeah. Right? And it's like, "Oh, this was her, but then something happened and she washed up on this beach and now she has like 2 months to live," right? Um, so it's like,
Yeah.
but she doesn't it feels to me like she doesn't fully understand like the 2 months to live thing, or not that she doesn't understand it, but she doesn't care about it at first, but it's like through this learning of, watching the
Yeah.
TV and meeting these people that now she cares about it, right? And
Mm.
is realizing she's on a ticking time clock because it feels like at first, and they sort of mentioned that at first she had very little emotion and, was just kind of existing. So it's like, yeah, if you're just existing, you probably didn't care what happened to you. But then as she's engaging with these people and learning, and then obviously falling in love with Yuza, now that panic and that dread is setting in, right? And because we didn't experience that much time with her where she was much more apathetic, we're spending the time with her where she does feel she's up against that clock. So that dread of knowing that like tomorrow's going to be my last day, and it's like, but maybe it doesn't have to be, and that mixture of this hope and like,
Yes.
oh, but and there's one ending, and this was also where I started to put the pieces together of her and Yuza because of the order I got it, right? There's an ending, a bad ending for her, where, the last words that appear on the screen are basically like, I'm sorry I didn't get to spend 800 years with you,
Yes. Yeah.
right? Which is
Yeah.
heartbreaking, right? And that's
Yeah.
when I started to put together that there's something that's going on, right? Because
Mm.
I was like, okay, well, I think Yuza has something weird with him, right? And his connection to mermaids, and in my mind at first, I thought Yuza was trying to find a mermaid to understand what was happening to him, not to extend her life, right? But then when she says that, I was like, oh, I think there's some
Yes.
other dynamic going on here, right? That was the first time
Yeah.
that there was like a hint of it. Um, you know, but instead she just fades to not fades nothing, she fades into bubbles that go off into the
Yeah.
sea and I was like, "Oh, that's like really depressing. That's an awful ending." Right?
Yeah.
And you know, so it's like you feel that with her where Yuza still has maybe he doesn't feel as dreadful because he has a whole life ahead of him still, right? Um
Yeah.
this is yes, there is whatever is going to happen to the island, but it is not as personal, and whatever happens to the island, he's still gonna come back. He's still gonna have 800 years, right?
Yeah, well, like I think a lot of the other characters, when you're learning stuff, you're learning because they're kind of hiding stuff for you. But for
Mhm.
Sato, it's amnesia, you know?
Yes.
For Sato, it's like she genuinely is just rediscovering these things. And I feel like it also helps then that when she learns things, you're like, oh, you have a new case file to go and read through and stuff. And it feels natural in the way of like she's like, oh yeah, I remember all this, and the case file kind of represents,
Mhm.
all of that information kind of floating back to her, you know. But like we do learn like, I mean, she is hiding stuff as well, of course, as we learn later in the game. But I feel like with her, it's more just kind of uh almost like the player's kind of perspective coming
Yes.
through, even if she is this very, very defined character.
Mhm. Oh, 100%. And her hiding things feels it does I think it's that it doesn't feel like she's hiding things that it's like, "Why are you hiding this?" Right? Like, I understand
Yes.
why you're hiding that you're immortal, right? Whereas, like, some of the other
Yeah.
characters, I'm like, "I don't understand why this is the thing you chose to hide." Like,
Yeah.
you chose to hide your feelings. Like, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, it happens. Um,
Yeah.
so it is like some of those things that it's like, "Okay, I understand why you're hiding this, and you're hiding this with the I don't want to be ostracized. I don't want to, um,
Yeah.
I don't want to be the freak. And I want to save, other people, right? Because it also feels like she is hiding her immortality and hiding this from everybody else because if she gets sold off, right? Then fine, no one's gonna miss her. Everyone's gonna get to live their life. And she's again sort of that self-sacrifice for the good of everybody else, right? So it's like her I can follow her thought process as almost like a hero, right? She's doing this for everybody else, right? She finally is deciding to be selfish when it comes to spending time with Yuza.
Yeah. Yeah. I really love how the game portrays like immortality and the way it kind of interrogates that kind of idea,
Mhm.
and because there's a lot of stories I can think of where they just are like, yeah, it would suck to be immortal. I mean, not to boil it down, but like, the game Lost
Yeah.
Odyssey, I think, spends a lot of time really just emphasizing like being immortal would suck. You would just watch everybody around you like die and
Yeah.
uh watch the world just turn and stuff. But there are times in this game where it does kind of interrogate that idea from a hopeful perspective and from kind of it also helps that it's set in like the 1980s,
Mhm.
so there is at least a little bit of hindsight to kind of look into from its settings perspective, but it's not fully against the idea that or it's not fully just indulging in the idea that these characters have suffered by being
Yes.
existing for 800 or more years. It's also playing around with the idea of like, yeah, but like there's shit that's good in life and there's shit that like makes you kind of want to exist,
Mhm.
for 800 years, like finding somebody that you love and stuff. And I just like that. It's not the kind of cut and dry way in which that would be presented. There's enough room here for them to really, dig into that and
Yeah.
properly kind of just play around with that idea.
I think that's also because even though we keep saying, I can't think of the right word right now because English is hard, right? But it is the
Oh, trust me, I'm
we're saying
struggling.
we're saying 800-year immortal, and it's like,
Yeah.
well, if it's only 800 years, you're not immortal, right? But that's what they call it in the game,
Right,
right? So
right, yeah.
there is a cutoff, right? It is not this immortal in perpetuity where you just live
Yes.
forever, right? So, and I think that is also where some of that hope and positive stuff comes in, because there is something sad about, like, yes, I'm going to outlive all these people and I'm going to see them pass away and blah blah blah. Obviously there's something sad about that, right?
Yeah.
But there is also an ending for you. And I think it is that knowing that there is an ending that makes you less apathetic and makes you want
Yeah.
to, you know, do the things and fall in love and whatever that looks like for these characters. And I'm obviously for Yuza and Sato, some of it is the romance aspect, right? But
Yeah.
it's like, yes, I need to get these experiences because I do have an end date, right? And I think we see that with Sato, again, the balance of like the hope and the dread, because it's like, I only have
Mm.
2 months left, right? And at first it's, well, I have 2 months left and I've lived this long life and whatever, right? But then as you get closer and closer, it's, oh shit, I only have a week. I only have this. Like, I have to
Yeah.
be there for these people that now I've let in, right? Because that's the other thing. She has let people in now. And it's like,
Yeah.
I have to be there for them. I have to celebrate with them. I want to do these things.
Yeah, it's
And
also not like she's lived that 800 years, you know what
right,
I mean? Like, she did kinda
right.
have that just taken away from her.
And now she finally gets to experience it. And, the other thing that was so telling to me with some of it is there is a track where you're just spending time with them that last night on the beach. And you can
Yes.
get to that before you know the context of why it's their last
Mhm.
night on the beach, right? And it's just like, oh, look at them like having fun,
Yeah.
enjoying themselves. And it's like, oh, this is so cute that there's this like, the first time I saw, I was like, this is so much fun and this is cute. And there's this mystery of things that's happening, but they still get to be, these teenagers just enjoying their lives and having a good time, right? And then later on in my playthrough, I'm like, oh, this is your last night together because this one's an 800-year immortal that thinks she's going to fade
Yeah.
into sea foam, come tomorrow, right? And
Yeah.
then obviously if you have done the things that you need to do, either everybody is crying at that point because they now know the truth about her and they know she's going to die tomorrow, or
Yeah.
if you did the right things, if you figured out how to speak to a very specific mermaid, right? It's like, actually no, I have something that will keep you alive.
Yeah, I actually so, yeah, I wanna talk about that scene now, but I did wanna mention just beforehand on the topic of immortality, one of the things that they talk about as actually being a negative as well, is that Yuza is made immortal when he's, like, he's a child, like, he's still very
Very
young
young
looking,
teen, yeah.
you know?
Mhm.
So, he was made, like, 5 it was, like, 5 years before the narrative starts that he's made immortal, and he's just stayed that way, and now he's gonna have to spend 800 years looking that way, so it is in many
Mhm.
ways a curse, you know, to even though it was just to like save his life and stuff, it is in many ways also a curse because
Yes.
there's a lot of limitations that come with looking like 15 for
Mhm.
your for 800 years, you know, which is again just an interesting play on that idea that we've seen, you know, a million times. Like, you know, I'm a big fan of Doctor Who, and that's a show that plays around with, you know, the Doctor's more or less immortality, you know, every
Mhm.
time that there's this you know, a new cycle, you know, a new regeneration and stuff. And it's kind of building on that in a way, or it's playing off that in a way. Similarly in terms of ideas, I'm not saying that the writers were directly inspired by
Yeah.
Doctor Who, maybe they were, you know, but it's playing around with the idea of immortality in a way that is just interesting, and I think plays to kind of like the human condition in a way where it's like everybody's obsessed with living forever, that there's negatives to that, but let's not like miss the forest for the trees here. There are potential positives to that, you
Mhm.
know.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think, for Yuza, yes, it's like, and he every once in a while is like, yeah, but I'm always going to look like this, right? But it's also done in a way that is sort of cheeky funny, right? And
Mhm.
it's some of it is people's reactions to it and some of it is him just like, I think, coming to terms with it in some way, right? But again, that feels very human no matter what circumstances they're facing, right?
Yeah.
And again, you mentioned it. It's like this is a curse and this is not something that he asked for. And this also I think goes back to that trauma bonding, right? That I
Mhm.
first
Yeah.
thought some of this was between Yuza and Sato because like for both of you, you didn't ask for this,
Yeah.
right? For different reasons, this was, thrust upon you, right? One to save your life and one because somebody was obsessed with you, right?
Mhm.
Um, which is what leads to all these killings in general.
Yeah.
Um, but it's like this, these circumstances that have brought them both here is interesting that they have these parallels. So I think it also leads to what we were talking about before, where the bond between the two. I'm like, yeah, you have lived very similar
Yeah.
trajectories or had similar experiences that it makes sense that you would reach this bond. It's just that the
Yeah.
way you came to be cursed is very different. Um, and one of those people that cursed you is still obsessed with you and is trying to steal you away from everybody else. Um, and one of those people that cursed you is still sort of angry with you, but is maybe thinking about why she cursed you and will tell
Yes.
you that.
Yes. So, yeah, okay, let's talk about that. Yeah. So, okay, that scene where basically, the storyteller just kinda tells you, you've been seeing a mermaid this whole game. Like, you've not been, like, thinking about it, but there's another mermaid in this game that you've been,
Hmm.
passing by on your way in the door, essentially, the whole game. Why don't you go chat to her, see what she thinks about all this? And how did you go about that? Because you were reviewing. I don't think you got the game early, did you?
No, I got it like the day before it came out or something like that.
Yeah, that would have stumped me like crazy if I was reviewing the game. That would have sent me into a spiral
So
because the
it's
way,
so
yeah, how did you figure
it's
that out?
it's so funny because I was like jotting things down. I wish I had my notebook like in front of me. But I was like jotting things down and I was like, okay, there's three mermaids and one of them is gone already and done and great. So I'm like, you know, writing this down and I kept writing Yumeko question mark, right? Especially since we know that people have changed their names. Right? So I'm like,
Yes,
okay,
yeah,
so there's somebody else, so I was like, okay, we don't know what happened with this third mermaid, blah, blah, blah. Right. Um, and I, because I was playing on mouse and keyboard. I'll be honest, I don't know that I would have done this or been able to get to this if I was playing on like a Switch or something
yeah,
because I was
yeah. I've
playing
been
mouse and
switching between my
keyboard.
laptop and my Steam Deck, and if I was playing that part on the Steam Deck, I'm not sure if I would have
Well,
ever figured
because
it
the
out.
first thing too is it's seeing that save file, right?
Yes, yes, the save file, which is like a repressed memory, or it's like an indication to use a
Yes. So
basically, yeah,
I would not like thankfully, right? My mouse is wired, so it's like it has one of the scrolling wheels, right?
yes,
So
yeah.
I'm literally sitting here and I'm like, okay. And I was actually like I was gonna stop playing, right? I was like, okay, I'm at this point, right? Let me and because the scroll I see like there's something weird at the bottom, right? And I'm like, okay, so I scroll and I'm like, what is this weird thing at the bottom, right? And I click it, right? And again, because at this point I'm like, this is a game that's breaking the fourth wall and blah 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 blah, right? And I took that moment that we see almost like a voice that is speaking to you through like the ether, right? And
Yes, yeah,
I was like, okay, so somebody is speaking to me, but I can't see them. I can't
yes.
like do anything, right?
I mean,
And this is where I was
yeah.
thinking about that training from some of these other like fourth wall breaking games, right? I was like, okay, so like, you know, it's like she says come speak to me. You have to like knock 3 times or whatever she says,
Yeah.
right? And I'm like, well, knock 3 times. And again, because I've played games where you have to do things sort of out of the box, right? And I was talking about this game recently. I'm like, okay, so I was like, the only other person that I can see that I can find easily, right, that is not in the main game is literally the mermaid
Mhm.
that's sitting there, like,
Yes.
when you boot up the game, right?
Yeah, which stuck out to me initially because I was like, "It's interesting
Yes.
that they put the mermaid in the, you know, the title screen because we don't necessarily know what the mermaids look like unless you're,
Mhm.
like, looking at the art that's in the case files and stuff." So it's
Yes.
interesting that they would put one of the designs there and it's, like, animated and stuff.
And so I was like, "Okay, call upon me 3 times," and I'm like, "Well, we know one is not here, Yumeko," so I was like, "It has to be this thing here, right?" And then
Mm.
I'm like, "Okay," and I literally I was like, "If I don't do this now, I'm gonna forget that this is, that this is the last thing she told me. Because once you see that
Yes.
file, you can't go back to it. I mean, it's in your I was recording the whole thing also, so, like, it's I could go back and watch it. I almost never go back and watch my recordings
Yeah,
unless I need
nobody's
something.
doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm like,
on,
unless
like,
I
a
need
first
something
run.
for a review, I'm not
Mm.
going back to look at it. But so could I have done it? Sure. But I was like, "No, I have to just do this now or else I'm gonna forget." So I was like, "Okay, 3 times." So I'm like, I guess I click on her 3 times, and, like, when you look at the game, she's not really looking at you, right? She's like and I think that was the other thing. I'm like, she's looking out as if she's watching, right? Like,
Yes.
she's
Mm.
watching what's happening, and now from this other perspective, it's like, "Hey," and then and I did try this, you can't do it again. You speak to her the one time, and that's it,
Yes.
right?
Well,
So it's like, "Okay."
she asks like, "Oh, who am I speaking to right now?" And if you get that wrong, they just kind of kick you back and you have to try again.
Yes.
But yeah, that's the only opportunity to kind of repeat that it gives you.
Yeah. It's like once you go through the conversation, like, you're done, like, that's it.
Yeah.
But so I was
And
like, "Okay."
I know that because I got it wrong the first time because she's like, "Who am I speaking to?" I'm like, Dara." And then I was, "Oh,
Like,
right.
"No."
Oh, yeah, use that."
Yeah, she's like, "No, I'm not. No."
Yeah, yeah. Who's Dara?
Yeah, who's that? They don't exist in this universe. They don't exist in
Yeah.
this game. No, it was a very interesting like, a very interesting concept, and again, like, I took it as, like, you know, she's calling to you from the ether, and not even that she's fully calling to you from the ether, but, you know, it ties back to that initial dive, right? And it might
Mhm.
be that I was so on edge because they yelled at me so not yelled at you, right? But they yelled at me so early in the beginning, like, "Look around, girl, like, do the things." Like, I'm like, "Oh, yeah, okay." Um, so they when they, tell you, like, "Go back and look," and then you see the ghost or whatever they call it, I can't remember. They do have a term
Mhm.
for it,
Yes, yeah.
right? And, like, your sort of first potential death. Um and I was like, okay, so it felt like this is the moment that I swapped from being the user that we're seeing in one narrative to the user here, right? So it feels so my sort of interpretation, and people can obviously interpret it different ways, and maybe they intended it different ways, but it feels like that save file memory is talking to is almost talking to whichever user is now in this other world with her,
Well,
right?
yeah,
That
that's
like
what they
Yeah,
sorry.
that then you as the player are passing that message on. It's like a weird you're connected but not fully connected.
Yeah, well, they say that, it's basically Yuza's spirit can't return to Ryugu, which
Mhm.
is like the kinda it's almost like the
Ryugu,
afterlife
that's yeah.
or something. Yeah, and basically, when you're passing through the title screen, I think they say this somewhere, but you're passing through, like, a portal in Ryugu
Mhm.
to come to this kinda, like, the material
Yep.
world, essentially, through this, like, spirit world. And that's where she's reaching out to you from with that
Mhm.
save file. She's, like, sending you a message from Ryugu. So it's a really cool way of connecting that, both through, you know, the mechanics and stuff like that. But I'm pretty sure like there's something about like Yuza's connection to Ryugu has been severed and the player is
Is the
playing his kind of
connection.
subconscious.
Mhm.
Yeah, they're playing his as his connection to Ryugu. You're kind of seeing it through the perspective of his consciousness in Ryugu.
Yeah,
It's
which is
very
interesting. Which
convoluted.
it's so interesting because it's like he severed, but you still can, you're still doing it, and that's why it's so
Mhm.
interesting. You're playing him in the world where he's alive, right? But then you are
Yes.
also him when you are speaking to the mermaid, and then which means you're also him when you're speaking to the storyteller. And it's like, so
Yes.
you're always him in some capacity, you
But
know,
still severed from the version that you're
right.
seeing in the game.
Which
Yeah.
which I think is then what's so interesting when you get towards like the end of the game. Or again, I'm gonna say end because it was the way that like I experienced
Yeah,
it,
yeah.
right? Um, when it's like, oh, and it felt like there was this force that was making me do these certain things, right? And obviously the
Yes, yeah.
characters are talking about you, right? At you as the player, right? When you as the player are this consciousness that is technically severed, but yet you
Mm.
are manipulating the things that are happening. So it's like you're severed, but you're in this manipulation role to get them to the
Yes.
ending that you want them to be in. So it's like you're severed, but you still have some power here, right? You can still do these
Yeah.
things. You can still, and I love that they keep talking about like, oh, this force and use this like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, I definitely don't can't do this. I have no power to do so. What do you mean? Right? And it's like
Yeah.
this version of you has no power to do it, but my version of you, right, that I am controlling has all
Yeah.
the power to do this.
Yeah, and the interesting thing about that as well is that the first game did actually achieve something similar to that. I won't give out all the details, but it did kind of convey this thing of like the perspective that you're seeing the game from is separate to the world in which it exists and
Hmm.
stuff. Or there's like a contextual reason for that. But the way they were able to redo that here was one that I was not expecting because it is kind of like lightning striking twice in a way. It's like, how are they going to be able to hit me with that kind of like surprise or that kind of twist
Hmm.
again? But the fact that they actually managed to achieve it now has me like, okay, if they are making a third one of these, they're really gonna have to like either write the heck out of the story, which they do every time, of course, but like also find a way to make that fresh again because
Hmm.
it's so incredible that they managed to do that here. I have no doubt that they will. Like I really think this team knows what they're going for with these games, and it's incredible how they're so small but they're very dense as well.
Hmm.
The games are, and so I have no doubt that they will be able to achieve that. It's just so cool to see like a twist done well a second time, because I'll be totally honest, a lot of these like visual novel sequels, um I find don't necessarily hit the second time.
Hmm.
I didn't love Nirvana Initiative as much as the first Eye of the Somnium Files. Obviously Danganronpa 2 is the GOAT. And Danganronpa 3 is unique and interesting in its own ways as well there. But like I find that it's very hard to surprise the player in the way that they
Yes.
do. But here they have really managed to do that again, at least from my perspective,
Hmm.
to the point where I'm like, okay, these guys just have it. You know what I mean? Like, this is nothing to worry about here. Like they know how to really just, yeah, just keep innovating on this very very small idea ultimately.
I mean, I think sometimes some of that is also because it's so well contained,
Mm.
right?
Yeah,
I think like you said, it's dense, but it's a small game. It's a shorter game, right? Dense
yeah, that's
if
what I
you're
mean.
reading
Yeah,
everything, right? But I think
yeah.
when you try to make it, I think that is what gives them the ability to do that because
Mhm.
they probably have these are our constraints, right? And we're building this within these constraints instead of I think sometimes with some of these games they almost are too big, right? Or
Yeah,
there's too much storytelling or there's, too much of whatever that then that surprise, that shock sort of, you know, falls out. Um, or it's like, "Oh, you saw it coming so long
yeah,
ago because, the story has now been going on X amount of hours," right? I think by
yeah.
keeping it shorter, right? And I'm saying shorter sort of loosely because it also depends, how fast of a reader are you? Like how much are you taking in? Do you have to go back and
To be
refer back to
fair,
it, right?
on the visual novel spectrum, it is shorter because some of these
It is.
games I've spent like up to 100 hours just getting
Oh,
through the first time. Yeah,
100%, right? And that's why it's like it's shorter, but I feel like it's the constraints and it's like this is what we work within, right? So
Yeah.
keeping the I think that's very smart. It's like by saying by keeping with this and this is what we're working in, how do we put in the surprise, right?
Yeah.
At least that's how it feels to me because I'm like it doesn't feel like it's trying to do too much,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it's ambitious in all the right
In
ways,
the
you know what I mean? They're
yes.
not trying to overreach, they're not trying to,
Mhm.
like, necessarily even change the genre or
Yeah.
anything like that. They're just playing the hits incredibly well and also just it goes back to respecting the player's intelligence,
Mhm.
respecting them to engage with it, think outside the box and, stuff that the genre does when it's at its best.
Yes. And I think they have figured out that formula. Um, and I'm like, yes, keep with this formula and find, just enough twist, that it works. Um, because without that you run the risk of just being too much of a carbon copy of like your first game or your second game or whatever it is that you're looking to do. And this felt very for me, right? And I love a good visual novel. I've
Mhm.
played maybe too many of them. Um, but this felt refreshing because it was densely packed, but
Mhm.
respecting my time and my intelligence and making me want to think outside of the box,
Yeah,
right?
yeah. Like if I have an issue with the story, just to park us a little bit, is just that I love Avi and Circe's. Is that what we
Mhm.
decided we were
Yeah.
calling her? Yeah, we I loved their sections the most because just as characters they're really fun. They have a great dynamic. Um but I think that their sections are probably just the exposition dumps for a lot
Mhm.
of the game because they're coming into the island with all of this history, with all of this
Yes.
knowledge, with all of this context to, they're there to investigate it and to learn stuff. Meanwhile, with Yumeko, we start from the island with her. We don't
Mhm.
really go mainland, but we start mainland with Avi, and I think that theirs were probably the ones that I was just kind of trudging through dialogue. It helps that they're really likable characters delivering the
Yes.
dialogue. They do also have one of the more unique sections in the game where you are actually, allowed to puzzle solve and you have to, there's the bit with the box,
Mhm.
the tamate bako, or I think it's called, where you've got to kind of, basically unlock it or find out where,
Yeah. I think
there's
that gave
some
me the
puzzle
hardest
solving there that
time.
I think is cool. Yeah,
Like
yeah. The original game doesn't have anything like that though, which is nice. It's all kind of the diegetic, like going into the files and learning things and then repeating them back. But this game actually has like, tangible puzzles, which I
mhm.
liked.
Yeah, it's funny because that box gave me the hardest time, and it is literally just the last piece to unlock because I could not find the perfect lining of it. The
Yeah,
first 3, I was like, "Great, got it." Or I think it was the first it was either I think the first 3, yeah. Then the last one, I was like,
yeah.
"Where is this perfect spot so that this box will unlock?" And it's just me if you look at the footage, it's just, like, me going back and forth, like, "Where is this one?" And then I had to, like, pull up and then I'm, like,
Yes.
pulling up the map because I'm like, "Okay, the island has changed a little bit," and, like, "Okay, but I know that it's
Yeah.
somewhere here, but where? Here? Like, what am I" But I think going back to them, it's like it makes sense that they are the exposition dump, but then also the one with the puzzle, so you don't feel like you're just
Yeah,
reading
you are.
everything
Yeah.
through them, right? So you're doing
Yeah.
something else with them. The other piece, that I had a lot of fun with is um the the sort of magic curse casting that Cersei does, and then also the assistant that Yumeko runs around with, right? Where you are actually battling each other,
Yes.
right? And like
Yeah.
binding them and doing this and like
Like I said, wizard shit.
yeah, yeah, and I'm like, this is, you know, again, for the most part, the game feels very grounded. But in these moments, that's where like some of the
Yeah.
fantastical moments hit. But it's a fun. I think it's those moments that it feels like a little bit of a fun reprieve from everything
Yeah.
that's happening.
I think it makes sense for them to go in that direction as well because they did reel back on a lot of the horror stuff, which is
Mhm.
where a lot of the kind of fantasy stuff came in the first game. So in this one, I think going a little bit more into the supernatural stuff on its face or a little bit more immediately
Mhm.
makes sense, because you are leaving something by the wayside by making it less of a horror game.
Yeah, so you're just leading into something different, but and again, it was like
Mm,
this fun these fun sort of silly things and, one of them it's like, "Just tell her to give up," and it's like, well, you can't tell her to give up or you can't trick her right away, like, you have to, like,
yeah.
bring down her, her guard, and how do you do that? Well, by
Mm,
doing these other things, so I thought that was again, it's very clever wordplay in a visual novel, right? Because
yeah.
you're not gonna do the Danganronpa thing of having, the cursor go around and you have to click the options and blah blah blah, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that feels, very that game, right? So it's like you're using basic mechanics, but using it in a way that still feels fun and sort of fresh because you're dealing with interactions between characters that feel very lifelike and feel very vivid and very real,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
it's a nice way of doing it, and I think those you don't get too many of those moments in this game, but when they do come in, I think they're very well executed.
Yeah. And we were speaking about Avi's section as well. I think the payoff for that kind of investigative portion is really good as well because one of the most memorable scenes in the game is the scene with Somekawa when
Mhm.
you're on the boat with her and essentially she kind of like begs you to use the curse on her that turns her into a half fish human
Mhm.
hybrid. It's the one that kind of just slowly kind of eats away. It,
Yes.
it kills her.
Mhm.
But I just thought that that scene was just one of the most memorable in the whole game for me, just because the setup of it is so surprising.
Mhm.
And it's dark. It's a dark moment. She expect basically begging you to kill her.
Yeah.
Um,
And with
in
his
return
character
for
who's so
the
light,
blocks. Yeah.
his character
Yeah,
is like the
yeah,
comedic
he's like the
relief.
jolly guy. Yeah.
Yeah, and to
No,
have
it's
that
great.
and this character who's like, "Kill me." Like, I don't wanna
Yeah,
live anymore, right? Like, I
yeah.
I messed up and I live with this
Again,
grief.
it's the
Now get rid of
immortality
me.
negative
Mhm.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, "So get rid of me. I'm done." And he's like and again, you get the it's like, "Do I do this? Do I not?" Um, and it goes back to, "Oh, and you kind of depending on how you're playing it, right, you kind of know that this is what's happening because they're investigating this half fish, half uh human body and someone tells you, "Oh, we ran the check and it's Somakawa who's been missing." And it's like, "Oh,
Mhm.
wait. Like this is how we got here." And again, you're experiencing this not in a straightforward way.
Yes. Yeah.
You're experiencing it after the fact and you're putting the pieces together which is really really cool. And I realize that we've been talking so much and we haven't actually talked about the villain. If we,
Right.
pinpoint a villain, which is also like a really interesting characters, right? Um, because as you mentioned, this is taking place in like the 80s, right? And we mentioned
Mhm.
before where it's like the Ama divers and they're mostly female. Um, and part of the villains or one of the characters that's sort of villain like is one of the Ama divers. And it is this, I need to get out of here, and my ticket out is this person, right, who I'm doing this favor for. And I think that's a really interesting thing when we're talking about like the
Yes.
80s and
Yeah.
Japan, right?
Mhm.
And and obviously this is something that is still very prevalent in Japan and again cultural context, right? Of
Yes.
the islands and the farther out places in Japan have less and less young people because they are trying to make it in the cities and trying to get out, right? And we sort of see this, and I can't think of her name right now, but we see this in this
Yeah.
character who is handing out the mirrors, right? She's
Yeah.
handing out the mirrors and she's doing this, and those mirrors are what is tagging the curse to be able to kill these people on the island. So it's also again, it's some of this cultural context in the story, right? Um,
Mhm.
but it is also playing with this idea of the curses, right? And how we're getting there, and again how all these characters come together because we meet her very early on too.
Oh,
And
yeah, she's, like, one of the first people you meet when you
yeah,
come back,
from the
from diving
dive.
as Yuza. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, here's just another diver, and she gives you hints on if you want to get your diving score up, and she does all these
Yeah.
things, and you know, she seems very nice and great and wonderful. And then you find out that she's working alongside to get this curse, right? Um,
Yes, yeah, the heel turn there is
yes,
crazy, you know? It's
yes.
just yeah, it's it's so shocking and kinda out of left field, but
I I
y
definitely
yeah,
felt shocked with that curse, or with the curse, with the turn, because I was like,
yeah,
wait, what? Like,
yeah,
I wouldn't have expected this from you of all people.
yeah, especially when there's so many characters that are very, you know, obviously mustache twirling villains in the way, including, like, the
Yes.
businessman and stuff, that Avi is dealing with, uh you know, but to have one of essentially the teens, but one of them that's kind of off to the side, kind of doing her own thing
Mhm.
throughout the story, who you think is just natural as a supporting character, to have her be the one that's like actually like, you know, I'm okay with, you know, letting a little curse off that kind of just murders
Yeah.
everybody on the island,
I don't care
you
about the
know?
people, and I think it's also interesting where she's like, "I don't care about the people on the island," because I'm like, "Well, it sort of makes sense because when she's talking about some of the people on the island and they're like outdated, you know, ways of viewing things, and how they treat Yuza, and it's very like, oh well, I don't know why they, keep referring to this curse, and your mom is not you, right? And she seems very supportive in some
Mhm.
ways, right? Um Hikuko, that's her name. Sorry, I just looked it up because it was gonna
It could
bother
go,
me.
yeah, yeah.
So she seems very supportive, and maybe it's because we're like, okay, we're following this cast of teens and his close friends are supportive. So to see that turn and to see her reasoning, right?
Mhm.
But some of her reasoning is, it's selfish in some ways, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But it's like, I can you went too far, right? You went too
Yes,
far with
yeah,
putting this curse on
of
everybody.
course.
I understand that
Yeah,
this old school mentality is not a mentality that you buy into. I
yeah,
understand that you want to get off this island and not be an Ama diver because that industry is like fading,
yes.
right?
Mhm.
You just took it a step too far, girl. Like, I don't know why you thought this
Not
was the way to
sure we
go.
need to use an ancient curse to massacre everybody. Not sure
Yes,
that a little extreme, but
a little
respect the hustle, you know?
bit.
It's
Like,
International Women's Day, I can't fault her.
I can. Oh no. Like, I'm like, maybe you didn't need a curse. Maybe you could have just, I don't know, left and not come back, right? Like,
Yeah,
other
yeah.
people are just going to the
Is it
mainland
really
and going to
that
school,
hard to get
girl.
a boat? Yeah, is it really hard to get a ship to the mainland?
Other people seem to be doing it.
Yeah.
We're talking like, oh, I'm going back to school. I decided not to go to school. Whatever. And yes, it's the 80s, right? So it's a little bit of a, like, a different
Of
time.
course, yeah.
So
Yeah,
fine.
they are definitely playing on real world historical context and cultural Japanese conservatism to
Hmm.
make this story work, which is why it works, and I think why, you
Yes.
know, what makes her character very good.
Yes. And I think that's the other thing. Sometimes I play these visual novels and there's a character that I hate just because they're poorly written, right?
Yeah.
I don't hate her. I mean, I hate her because of what she did, but I don't hate her because she's poorly written, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
Which again is the strength of
I
the
hate her because I think
storytelling.
murder is bad, but
Right.
I also like, yeah, I shit sucks, man.
Yeah, right. Like, I'm like, I girl, like, what's
Yeah.
happening?
Yeah.
But so there's that aspect of it. But then also it's like, she's doing this with the, I'm gonna try and make sure I pronounce the Tomoshige, right?
Yes. Well done.
Because that's like the curse that's
Yes.
happening. And, you know, it's very interesting that that also comes back and is related to Sato's story, right?
Mhm.
And I think I think the moment that I sort of felt some of the most panic is when he finally confronts her and they're
Yes.
alone in those ruins, right? Because it's that very real moment of here is this, you know, stronger, I'm going to say physically stronger, right? Male presence that is then intimidating, right? This, character who is just coming to terms with who she is, right?
Yes.
And is
Yeah.
literally having flashbacks of things in this moment. And,
Mhm.
I don't remember if we actually see him grab her, but it feels like he has grabbed her and put her against the wall, and it might be that
Yeah, it's just very intense.
it's
Yeah.
very intense, right? And it's like he's clearly cornering her like emotionally and mentally,
Mhm.
right? So I think even if they don't show him grab her, I think I felt like she was, then also
Yes.
physically restrained, right? And it's an obsession, right? It's an obsession that he
Mhm.
has with her, right?
Yes.
It is
Mhm.
not love in the way that we are led to believe is between Yuza and
Yeah.
Sato. It is literally, I am the, and this is the one who fed her, or, this is how it's like
Yeah.
she became this immortal character. And now he's like, well, you have to spend this time with me and we need to go out
Yeah.
alone. And it's like, what? And it's like, I'm going to kill everybody unless you come with me. And it is like, that is so it's so domestic violence coded where it's like, I'm
Yeah.
gonna hurt the people you love if you don't do this.
It's it's like stalker coded
Yes.
as well. Like he's obsessed with it's obviously as well like the aesthetic like age gap as well is very like
Mhm.
severe about it. It's like I was saying with the scene with Wakamura, Sato's scenes are genuinely like where a lot of the horror is in the games. Like in the
Yes.
game, like her perspective is terrifying because not only are you learning all this stuff, you are just a teenage girl, who
Mhm.
has been amnesiac, who's been trying to, fit in, kind of fish out of water, perspective and stuff like that. But also now you have these older towering men who are
Mhm.
basically deciding what they're going to do with you, you know? And that's why like yeah, her relationship with Yuza does make a lot of sense. He's a lot more sensitive of a male character in the story as well. There's a lot of these big kind of like old like fucks essentially, like
Yeah.
dudes throughout the story. But with Yuza, he's a little more sensitive. He's a little bit more understanding. You know, so her character is fleshed out for other reasons as well, but through those as well. I don't want to say she's just fleshed out because of her relationship with the male characters, but they
Mhm.
do use her perspective in the story to kind of say something about the kind of unique position that she's in.
Yes. 110%. And I think, you know, I obviously Yuza is sort of presented as the main character, especially when you start, but I
Yeah,
think
you start with him. Yeah.
I think she's probably the most interesting character, right? And
Yeah,
again, I
she
think it's
her
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 story arc,
perspective is yeah. And
you
like I
know?
was saying, like you feel most aligned with her perspective because it feels like she's hiding the least at the very least, you know what I
Mhm.
mean? Or discovering the most alongside you.
Oh, 100%. And I think eh, maybe it's because of where 2026 has started and where it is. I think her storyline still feels so relevant. You know,
Mm.
obviously the game just came out in 2026, but we're talking about a game that's set in the 80s, right? And her
Yeah.
story still feels relevant to
Yeah.
like a modern day, right? It's like
Yeah.
these, you know, powerful men, whether they be rich powerful men or powerful because they were good sword fighters once upon a time 800 years ago, right? These powerful men imposing
Yeah.
their will on, a young female character, right?
But like they
So
draw a line between that with
they
Hikoma.
do.
Sorry, not to
Mhm.
cut you off, but they
Yeah.
draw a line between that. He was a very powerful
Mhm.
man, back then, and he's a businessman now, or at least
Yeah.
he's
Trying to
cosplaying as a
be.
businessman,
Yeah.
somebody in power, you
Mhm.
know?
Yeah. So it's like there's always these powerful, men that are doing this to her. So then Yuza of course feels like the escape. And not that he's just an escape, right? But it makes sense that she finds her comfort in him and
Mm.
opens up and then, you know, starts to explore life. And you're right where it's not just her relationship to these guys because she has the relationship um with Velma. I know her name's not
Yeah,
Velma,
with Velma.
but
Yeah.
right. And we see that, and in there we see like a strong, supportive, like female relationship, right?
Yes.
And
Also
like
with, Yusa's grandmother as
yeah,
well, there's a bond there as
there's a
well,
bond
yeah.
there that comes, and it's like, so you know, and I think that's what makes Sato the most interesting character. Not that everybody else isn't interesting in their own ways. Um,
No, yeah, yeah.
but she just had I think she shows so much growth within the game, right? Because
Mhm.
it's also depending on how you get to which ending you get to and how you play it, right? You also get the moment of her like taking back some of her strength from the Tomoshige, right?
Yes, yeah.
And that is a powerful moment in itself for this
Yeah,
character that is growing, right? And remembering and coming to terms with things. Uh, so I think there's just so much with her where Avi is the sort of comedic relief and she's the
yeah.
strength and the growth. Um
Well, I really
mhm,
like the scene that kind of turned me around on her and Yusa's relationship is the scene in which she kind of goes from having this nihilistic perspective, of
mhm.
being like, yeah, I'm just gonna, live out the next few
Mhm.
days and I'll die, so sucks that I didn't get to actually live 800 years and all that. But like the scene where he convinces her to live on, I think it's kind of framed as the scene in which she kind of begins to
Mhm.
feel affectionate for him. That scene I did find was actually quite, like, powerful emotionally, like, I did
Yes.
just the context surrounding it, knowing this character, being spending time with this character, and then getting to that scene, seeing in
Mhm.
terms of, like, how the men around her have tried to just objectify her and use her as, like, a chess piece, and then have her kind of find a
Yes.
reason to actually persist despite all of that, even if
Mhm.
it's not in chronological order. In terms of the way it's presented to the player, I thought it was quite powerful.
Yes. And I think, and I think that's why it's like they all sort of play this role, right? And that's why I'm like she's the one that grows and Yuza is sort of the catalyst, the one that keeps things moving and, keeps things going. Um,
Yeah,
and Yumeko also keeps things going in a, sort of different way, but they all have their role to play in how you're experiencing the story, uh,
yeah.
which is really good. I also just looked it up just to respect the character. The friend Velma is Sukasa, right? I was like,
Tsukasa, yep,
I
yep.
right,
Okay, I remember that. Velma, not Velma,
not
Tsukasa.
Velma, but I was like, I gotta put respect on this poor girl's name. Um, and then the friendship, and part of the reason I want to put respect on her name because if you do get the good ending, right?
Yes.
Um, Sukasa does allow Yuza and, Sato their happy ending,
Yeah,
and
that was a
especially for
really nice
Sato.
ending.
Yeah, especially for Sato. Yuza has only lived 18, 19 years, right? Yes,
Mm,
obviously he's seen some shit,
mm.
but, like, especially for Sato who has lived this unfortunate life where she has just died and reborn so many times and sacrificed herself for the island and all that, like, for Sukasa to say, "We're gonna have you both live a life that is comfortable for the next 800 years, and we're putting this in place
Mhm.
because, this guy who was trying to learn about immortality and that we've investigated and he was being really sketch, uh, you know, I'm inheriting all this money and stuff from him. What am I going to do with
Yeah,
it? Well, I'm going to build you this temple and I'm going to build this and we're going to, protect the island and we're going to do this and you can come into town when you want. Just,
yeah.
this very nice life for them.
So a side thing as well, I loved the scene where, Shotaro, Wakamaru's son, um, he realizes he's inheriting Wakamaru's debt,
Mhm.
And I love that fucking scene. It's hilarious that he's
Yep.
just freaking the fuck out, being like, "Yeah, getting my father's inheritance." They're like, "Oh, that's great, that's great." He's like, "No, I'm inheriting his fucking debt. I'm
Yeah.
fucked."
It's like, "Good for you, you're a jerk anyway." Like,
Yeah, no, yeah,
put
no,
your
he's sick.
collar down and walk away, bro.
Yeah, yeah. I think at one point, Sukasa. There we go. I was gonna resort to Velma, but I didn't. I think she actually kind of was like, "Oh, I can give you a loan or something like that." He's like, "Yeah, yeah, okay, cool," and she's like, "Oh, fuck you."
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, because it's that moment of where, he's like, "Oh, I've always been into you," and it's like, "Bitch,
Yes.
a day
Yeah.
ago, you were trying to get with Sato, what you talking about? What?"
Yes.
Oh.
Yeah.
Right, and
Yeah.
everyone's like, Tsukasa, you see this, right?" Like, and then,
Mhm.
she ultimately ends up going on the date with, Awai. I think his name is Awai.
Yes.
The
He's a
child.
homie. I like
Azami,
him.
Azami, um,
Izami. Yep. Yeah.
Azami. So she ends up, you know, going on a date with him, and it's like, "Oh," and you can see the whole and again, because 'cause they're young, right? And this is where
Mhm.
it feels light at times, right? Because it's like they're young, you can see that he, is into her, and he's like, "I don't know why she wants Shotaro so
Yeah.
bad," right? And it's like now the blinders are off, and they've gone the 4 of them have gone through this dramatic thing, and
Mhm.
it's this moment of, "I need to ask her now," because the juxtaposition of, "I need to ask her now because life is short," versus
Yes.
Sato and Yuzo, where it's like, "Well, life is long, and we're gonna be together for a very long time,"
Yeah.
right? And it's like, "Oh, we only
Yeah.
have so long.
I,
We need to
it's
jump into the." It's a great,
yeah. It's really
you know,
cool.
yeah. Um,
Yeah.
God, this game is just
Before,
so good.
but while we're on the topic of like the romance of the game, before we wrap up, I actually there's something I feel like I picked up on in this game that I feel like they were trying to do something with, but maybe it was a little more under the surface. But the way the mermaid talks about Yuza's mother, am I crazy for
No,
thinking that like there was, yeah,
no,
like she
the
even says that
mermaid,
it's more than what they had was more than just friendship.
and she
Like,
refuses to elaborate.
yeah,
Mhm.
she literally refuses to elaborate. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, because there's this idea that she resents Yuza for like existing,
Mhm.
and that she's like, oh, even though she got with that man, what we had was still way more stronger.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
I thought I was like, hello, what what do we have here?
Yeah. No, that is 110%. I
Yeah,
really, because it's the I can't remember the exact phrase, but it's like, don't mess with like a woman scorned or whatever it is, right? And I'm
yeah,
like, like the mermaid felt scorned and Yuza has to pay the price. Now, obviously, it works out well
yeah,
for Yuza because he gets to meet Sato, but
mhm.
he does have to be in like a 15-year-old body for the rest of his life. So good luck.
Yeah,
But no,
yeah,
I felt that too. I was like, there's no way that you get. I'm like, you are very, very bitter. And I think it's also, you know, I have to live this long life as a mermaid, and the
hmm,
person I love, Yuza's mom, right,
yeah.
is not going to live this full life with me, and now is cutting it even shorter for
Hmm.
this guy and her son. Like, who are they? Like, why are they so important?
Yeah. It's it's also not the first time I feel like the Paranorma Site games. I'll leave it at this, but like the first time I feel like the Paranorma Site games have dabbled in a little doomed Yuri. It's the first game has something I felt very similarly about. Although
Okay,
here I feel like the way they were writing around it was just like, okay, come on, you know.
just say
But
it.
yeah, come on. I know this writing. I know this speak.
Mhm.
I've played these games before.
I see what you're putting down. I see
Yeah,
it. Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, is there anything else you want to touch on before we wrap things up?
I think the only thing we didn't talk about, and I'll be honest, I did not complete them all, maybe at some point I will, is the freaking bird. The
Yeah,
freaking
I didn't.
birds.
Yeah, I didn't do the birds in the first game either. I do think that you get a reward for doing those.
Mhm.
Oh, there was file 38. We did say we were going to talk about file
We did say
38.
file 38, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So
I
yeah.
and I'll send you the screenshots so that you can put it in. Um, at the very beginning of the game, they ask you, "Did you play the first one? Did you play Hanjo?" Um, and I said no
Mhm.
because I did not play Hanjo, and I did say this in my review that like I did not play the first one. I jumped into this one.
Yeah. You
If
don't need
you
to.
s Yeah, you don't need to, except for
No.
and I think at the start, I think at the start of the spoiler cast too, I said this too, there's, like, one reason you would wanna say yes, but then you
Mhm.
have to answer questions. If you say, "No, you did not play the Hanjo game," you do not have access to see what file 38 actually says.
Yeah. So, File 38, it's still very vague. It's actually, like, maybe the most fourth wall breaking thing in the game because it literally has a message from the developers saying, "Thanks for playing Paranormasight. We hope to see you in the next one."
Mhm,
Um, but it teases something got to do with a character in the first game, or at least a pseudonym in the first game called Suigen Gamyodo. Yes, I had that taken down. I had to read it. Um, but basically, this is an alias in the first game for a character who is a serial killer, um, which is just one of the plot lines in the first
mhm,
game that coalesce. It's not. I'm not spoiling anything by saying that. Um, but essentially, they seem to be setting up something to do with that alias going into a third one, which potentially would have a connection to the first game, but it seems also would have a connection to this by them putting it in this game. You
mhm.
know, like them putting that teaser in this game, I feel like isn't, maybe it is the devs saying buy the last game as well, you know, like, but I do feel like it, they wouldn't have put it in this game if there wasn't to be something connecting the both of them.
Mhm.
So I do think that there will be a third game, hopefully sooner rather than later. 3 years was a bit of a surprise wait for this, but then again, it kind of just got willed into existence like 2 weeks before it came out.
Literally,
Um,
I don't know that anybody really knew that another one was coming out, and then it was like, was a
we
Nintendo
didn't.
Direct, and it was just like, "Hey,
Yeah.
by the way, this is happening." Like, "What?"
Yeah. No, that's why I was like shocked that I was in the Discord when it was announced. I was like, ah, Paranormal Sight, what the hell? Because it was genuinely just like I played that game 3 years ago now, I guess. Yeah, March 2023, and it's it was like a sleeper hit. You know, it was one of those early year games that manages to kind of pop off.
Mhm.
But then, like, the conversation died down enough to where I did actually fall off it and had to finish it. I only ended up finishing the first one just before this new one came out,
Okay.
because I had fallen off it and I was like, it's not like that game's ever going to get a sequel. You know, like, one day I would like to finish it, but I'd never really have a reason to. And then, lo and behold, you know, it's published by Square Enix, who a while back had this kind of like thing where they're like, oh, we're not making some of these smaller games anymore. We're only gonna, you know, go big on like Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest or
Mhm.
Kingdom Hearts. But somehow this managed to survive that, and I'm really grateful that it did because it shows that they saw the potential in
Yes.
that first game. And they're cheap games to make as well, you know.
Oh, yeah,
But I'm
compared to your
just
Final Fantasy, 100%.
well, yeah. My hope ultimately, what I'm trying to get at though, is that like we won't have to wait as long
Mhm.
for the third game. Um, you know, hopefully just a year or two. And that, you know, I think at that point then I'd be okay with them just being like, this is the trilogy. We'll have a third game that kind of tie these things together, but it'll still function as an anthology, and you know. But either way,
Mhm.
I guess that's maybe shooting a little too far ahead.
No, I don't think it's shooting too far ahead because if they're dropping I feel like if they're dropping this, they have ideas, right? Maybe
Mm.
some sort of work that they've already started to do, right? And I do think that maybe it is like, "Hey, go check out the first one," right? So that we can make this
Hmm.
third one and tie it back and, you know, and I think especially knowing that Square Enix is like, "We're gonna focus our time and attention on, like, these things and our funds on this," right? It could be like a developer saying, "Hey, if they see that there's interest in these games, right, like, we will be able to actually put out this
Mm.
vision that we have."
Yeah.
And yes, obviously this is a spoiler cast, so we've talked about some big plot points, but I think even though we've talked about the plot points, it's not just about the plot points with this game, it is like the journey. So
Oh, absolutely.
even if you have watched this without actually playing like the game, it is still so worth going back and playing the game and
It's
experiencing
also
it.
like the way things are presented is like the experience, you know? It is that
Mhm.
learning. It is that being nudged to go off in your own direction and read through these files or replay these
Mhm.
sequences to learn things. So even if I feel like you know the bigger points, it is the prior knowledge, having the prior knowledge going into them of other events and the sequencing in which you learn them that makes
Yes.
the payoff, you know, that makes it fresh. Like I know I said at one point that like I don't think this is the kind of game that I would replay, but I still think that there would be value in doing so. Like I want to replay 13 Sentinels, and the reason for that is I played that before it came out for review, and it was before it had an English dub, and I don't remember much of the story. So I feel like if I go back and re-experience that story, not remembering as much, it'll
Mhm.
be like playing it again, especially with like an English dub and stuff. And I think this is a similar thing where it's like, oh,
Yes.
if you just like give it a few years, you can come back to these games and practically just re-experience them because of the way your paths can kind of verge.
Mhm. I think the way your paths converge, and then I think, on a second play, or if you've listened to this and then, go and play it for the first time, I think you also will pick up on nuances that you either didn't pick up the first time or wouldn't pick up
Yeah.
on, not knowing where everything sort of leads to. And I think that's the joy of some of these games. You'll see how they drop the hints from the very beginning, right? And I
Yeah.
think that's the
There's
fun
also
of you
simply
and I
too
doing
much.
this. Oh, yeah,
There's
100%.
simply too much for us to talk about as well. There's so many things
100%.
that we just can't even
We'd
get
be
to,
here
you know?
for as long as we played the game, right? So,
Yeah.
but I
Yeah.
I do think this is one of those games that you can't play it right after you finished it the first time, but you can go back and play it,
Yes.
down the line, get a different
Mhm.
sense of enjoyment from, like I said, the little things that they drop, the little nuggets, the little like, oh my God, you were foreshadowing this to me from the first
Yes.
line, and I did
Yeah.
not know because I didn't have the context, and now with the context, you experience it in a different way. Um,
Yeah.
so, you know, this is the call to action that everyone should go buy this game if you haven't already.
Yeah. Absolutely. Co-signed. So with that, I think we're done.
Yeah.
I think that's everything we wanted to talk about for Paranorma Site, The Mermaid's Curse. Is there anything you want to plug before we go?
Uh,
Obviously your review.
yeah, check out the review. We'll link it in the description. Um, I had a lot of fun with it. I hope you enjoy the fourth wall breaking that I was able to put in that nobody told me to take out as part of the review. I was like, I'm gonna have fun with this, and hopefully they'll let it fly. Um,
Yeah, of
you know, Definitely check out the review. Check out the other stuff on Gamer Social Club. Check out Girl Pod.
course.
Um, you know, that's not as strict. I don't want to say strict. Uh, it's a little more free
Are we
flowing and
strict here?
tangent. No, that's why I'm like, no, not strict. It's very tangential. It's tangentially game related, but I think we have a lot of fun
Mhm.
on it. So yeah, go check that out, but also go buy this game so that we get a third one.
Yeah. Yeah. V asked me when I'd be going back on Girl Pod soon, so I'm immortalizing it in this video now that the call is out there. I told her when Girl Pod calls, you pick up the phone. So
You're
hopefully
welcome
that'll
anytime.
happen again soon. Yeah,
Anytime.
absolutely. Also check out the news pod because even though I'm not on it anymore, they are my friends, and you should watch their stuff,
They are the
and you should
stricter
watch everything.
podcast.
Yeah. Um, and you should watch everything on Gamer Social Club. Hopefully, we'll have more spoiler casts for you soon. This is kind of a sporadic show by nature.
Hmm.
Just it's whenever we feel impassioned enough to talk about a game as much as we did about Paranormasight and a Dispatch. That's when these shows will appear. But anyways, thank you all so much for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one.